Hello, captains of Armband. Welcome to our fourth episode of Decoding Football. And today, along with us, we have Mr. Jorge Reis and Mr. Roshan Rao to discuss the role of a football coach within a club. So, if you're a football fan just like us and love to learn from football personalities, make sure to watch all of our videos and subscribe to our channel to help us grow better. So, Mr. Hayes, welcome back. How have you been?
Hello, Mr. Sovanik. Hello, Mr. Roshan Rao. For me, it's a pleasure always to be here with you, interacting, sharing some point of view.
Thanks, Mr. Reyes. It's a pleasure to have you. I hope we will have more videos with you. So now coming to Mr. Rao, how have you been?
Yeah, thank you. I've been good. I've been a bit busy. It was great to catch up on the last video that you guys came up with, and it's a pleasure and a great opportunity to be back with George again on this podcast platform to be discussing ideas about coaching and to be sharing experiences, exchanging experiences.
So it's also a pleasure of Armband to have you guys talking to us about the different tactical aspects of the game. So it's a pleasure to have you guys. And now we will set the ball rolling today. And we will start with an interesting question. At first, I will ask the question to both of you, starting with Mr. Reis. So, what is the most important duty of a head coach within a club?
The most important duty of the coach, from my point of view, will be related with the sensitivity that the coach must have to fastly feel, know, understand the culture around the club, the organization, the whole philosophy in terms of what are their goals, what are the reasons they are hiring you to the club, so you know what kind of expectations exist around your function. Organize and provide to the club according to your attributes, according to your know-how, your previous experiences. So the contribution that you will have to that specific organization will be a consequence of the whole analysis that you've done previously to your arrival, but also is very important that in those first days in the club you can directly get your sensations, get your own vision about the state of the organization to then contribute to optimize it as much as possible.
A very insightful answer from Mr. Reis. And now I will go to the same question to Mr. Rao. I will just add one point. What is the big transition that takes place when you take that leap from being a support staff to being the head coach, whether it be the assistant coach, whether it be a trainer, whatever? So, what is the big transition that takes place when you take charge as a head coach, and also the base question of what is the role of a head coach within a club?
Um, this it's a question that I've asked myself during my journey of coaching a lot. What is the role that I'm tasked with? And throughout the phase, I've had many answers that have come up, and especially in the beginning, and then later on with some experience. And I've realized that at the end of the day, the most important job, the most important duty of the head coach in the game of football is to win games. And I know it sounds very cliche, because of course you need to win games, but there are so many other responsibilities, of course. But that, for me, that's first and foremost the responsibility of the coach, because at the end of the day, football is a competitive sport. And I think, regardless of the circumstance in which a head coach comes into the position, I think every team, every dressing room, um, every club is looking to win games. It's a competitive sport, and everything else for me comes secondary when it comes to instilling the club culture, um, getting youth players on board, looking to build the academy. Everything else for me has to be in a reflection of the goal of winning, and the winning mentality needs to be instilled from the beginning. And even if someone says that, if you're the head coach of a youth team, then probably, or if you're in the academy, and probably having that sort of competitiveness is probably counterproductive, because you're dealing with, to have such a competitive nature probably is counterproductive to bringing youth players, getting them developed. But even then, I would say that, from my experience of the academy, if as a head coach you don't have that ambition to win, you don't instill that culture to win every Sunday, every weekend. If you don't instill that drive in your players to win games, at the end of the day, you will end up losing the dressing room, because then the players will ask themselves, "What are we fighting for?" So I think there are a lot of things that comes into play when as a head coach, instilling a culture, getting your game model onto the pitch, so seeing the players express that, having the right mentality, getting youth players on board, making sure that your best players are able to get the best out of themselves, working with transfers, getting new players in, getting new players into culture. So for me, that's well, fortunately or unfortunately, that is the demand of the game, to make sure that you win. And this is one of the reason, and the reason I say this is because, from my experience, um, I was not a person who got into coaching with the idea of winning. That was not my first mindset from winning games. I like the tactical aspect of it. So for me, I enjoyed my time more as an assistant coach than as a head coach, because the head coach has to win, whereas as an assistant coach you can focus on tactic, you can focus on the other aspects of preparation for the game. But if you want one simple answer, what is it that the head coach needs to do? It is definitely to win.
So I just remember a Jose Mourinho quote because of this. He once said, "You are either a winner or you are nothing." So it reminds me of, after listening to Mr. Rao, that quote is pretty relevant to this answer. Now, coming to another talking point, I will start with Mr. Reis. We have often seen coaches. Last time I have heard Mr. Pep Guardiola saying that during his time in Germany and England, he started with a different mindset, and by the time he reached its end, his mindset was totally different. So, can you share with us one or few potential life experiences that entirely changed your perspective as a coach?
Um, well, first, to summarize my experiences, I started my journey as a coach in Portugal before I moved to Spain, and from Spain I could have different experiences around the world. Um, More significant in terms of duration was in Africa, 2 years in Nigeria, and more recently I've been in China as well. Um, from my first steps as a coach, it was a significant uh, change of paradigm for myself to learn the Barcelona philosophy, ecological approach, an approach that looked into the rehumanization and renaturalization of the process of training that in my first steps as a coach, uh, I got the idea that the role of the coach was uh, more important. That in the end, it mainly is in the here and now, as we are talking about a game that is played by 11 different human beings with different experiences. They already have the knowledge, the practical knowledge about how to play. So they all they need is something that articulates them in the way they express their abilities, in the way they express their nature. So the role of the coach, not as someone who dictates what they have to do, but as someone that generates this articulation between everybody through the macro intentionality, through the ideas that we can put in common between everybody that will allow them themselves to be more than what they do isolatedly. That development will only happen through the game, by playing football as much as they can, and with the most autonomy possible that we can generate, and how much we can empower them in that autonomous process.
So one of the best things about this whole show that I personally like is the very well explained. It's all the questions are being answered in a very detailed manner by both Mr. Reis and Rao, and this is the prime example. This answer was so articulate about how the things are being done and how the experiences change a person. So I will again go to Mr. Rao with the same question, but I will just add the point I did previously, that you said that when you started your journey, you didn't take winning as importantly as you think you would have right now, because now you say that after managing you knew that it's winning is the most important thing. So is there any other instances like this when you thought that this was my mindset before coming to coaching, and after coaching for a few years or few months that totally changed, that the previous mentality was not there? Is any instance like that happened to you also?
When talking about personal instances, I think there were two significant moments for me that changed the way I started to look at coaching. Especially, I knew from a very young age, I was never a great player. When my other teammates were focused on how much goals they were going to score, in the youth, I was thinking about what formation the other team is playing, and how are we shaping up, and are we playing with four defender. I was thinking about these things, which as a player, I think my teammates were probably better, of than me as a player. But then when I got into coaching, for example, when I had to take over the reserve team of my club, and the first half of the season that I had to coach, I found that I was involving myself with a lot of tactical aspects of how the team is going to shape and how the team was going to play, but somehow I could not get across to the players in the dressing room. I could not convey my message across. I didn't have a control over the dressing room. I used to spend so much time and energy in coming up with a plan um, for the weekend, and somehow it was not materializing. And one of the turning points was that I stopped in the following season. I stopped seeing players as magnets on a tactic board. And this is one of the things which I think a lot of people do when you're not in coaching, but you're heavily motivated by the tactical aspect of the game. That you see that, oh, we're playing 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3. You see the 11 players as magnets on a tactical board. And as a coach, for me, one of the turning points is when I stopped seeing players as magnets, because we are dealing with human beings, just the way Jorge said that each player has a personality, each player has a story, each player has overcome challenges, or probably is overcoming challenges currently. Some of them are fighting for playing time. Some of them are dealing with personal problems. Some of them have come up playing on the street. Some of them have come up through academy. So every player has a different story. And as a coach, you need to be a psychologist in knowing and understanding these aspects. And then when you get into the personal, when you get with your players on a personal level, that totally changes the way you look at coaching, because it's not just about tactics. It's not just about seeing your players as magnets on a tactical board. as I said. So that was one of the first experiences for me. And the second was around the same idea. I think when I was coaching the women's team, and we were going to face a difficult opponent on the weekend. And what I did was, for one of the trainings, I tried to put in an extra session in between during the week. And for one of the trainings, I had two players from the men's team join in, just to be able to provide a little bit more of a challenge, because the opponents we were facing on the weekend were of a higher caliber, and they were the leaders on the league table. And I had designed the session, and the way I liked to play the game was a lot of positional games, a lot of rondos in the beginning of the session. And I had planned the session in such a way that it was organized in the way that it was supposed to have, players in the positional game who are going to be the neutral players, who are going to be outside. And I thought, okay, I had planned for the session well, and everyone was clear what they were supposed to do. And I had the first part of the session running, and just before the end game, which, when after the finish of the training session, towards the end, you want to just have the players play the game. I had a word with the male players about what did they think. And one of them, who was a really good player, he told me that, I think the session is okay. That I get that the idea of the session is, it's a great idea, this positional game and everything, but there's no intensity. You know, Uh, you need to have intensity. The players need to have no time on the ball. They need to be constantly engaged. And since then, one of the things that changed the way I thought about coaching was I was always focused from then onwards, less with the design of the session, more on intensity, more on getting players, because at the end of the day, the football is played with the ball. And the players, when they have too much time, they end up thinking. And in the game on the weekend, you ultimately have to constantly make quick decisions. So that was an anecdote, an intensity that I keep telling whenever I come up with a similar situation. I keep saying that was a very changing experience for me, the way I looked at my coaching from then onwards.
So from both Mr. Rao and Ray's answer, one thing we learned, that is how man management takes a very key role in a management role or in a coaching role, whatever you can say. How important is it to man manage the person? How to see every person as a totally different individual? Because last time I had one podcast with Mr. Josh Bednash, he's the under 15 coach of Crystal Palace. He once said that every individual needs to be treated like a totally different entity, and that only enables you to get your relationship to the next level with that person, which in reality also makes the player and makes the team play all better and help to build a culture within the side. And again, it has been shown in today's podcast as well. So how important is it to build relation, and how important is it to plan the sessions in the right way? So now, coming to planning sessions and training sessions, I will start with Mr. Reis with the question. And I listened to a few podcasts, one from Mr. Guardiola, one from Mr. Klopp, that how they plan the sessions. For Mr. Guardiola, the session is 90% of the gameplay. He plans all those tactics. He accustoms the team to the way the opponent teams plays and how he will play. On the other hand, Mr. Jurgen Klopp prefers more the intensity. He wants to train the team in a more intense way, but also in a fun kind of a way. So now I will ask this question. So what are the things that you keep in mind before designing your training sessions and programs before the match?
There are some key points that I will always take in consideration, knowing that it is an exercise that also requires context, as different circumstances and different contexts for sure will require to pay more attention to certain points than others. But in a general sense, we want to concentrate on match day. On match days, we need to invest our um, our time in training into uh, the creation of contexts where we are representing this match, where we are experiencing the nature of the match with the most similarity possible, knowing that it's never possible to represent it uh, uh, taking in consideration the nature of it as the game as the game always brings us uh, with new interactions, with new patterns, with unexpected level of emergence of, um, of of things that we, even if we plan it in a perfect way, we cannot control that level of detail. Um, but we also need to recognize that the match day uh, is the most uh, is the day that where we are training uh, the most. This interaction will also guide us uh, to manage the fatigue between the different match days. So we need to recognize that the freshness of our players is not the same one day after the competition, then 2 days, or in the previous day to the competition. We also should not be so demanding in terms of complexity, in terms of energy required in the session than if we were in the central day of the week, where the distance for the matches is allowing our players to have more demanding performance and training sessions. And then in this planning of the week, this management of the recovery, the fatigue, and the freshness for the next match is a main point, and a central point. Taking that in consideration, looking into what we are, into what are our ideas, our identity, and emphasizing certain things uh, more than others according to those attributes of our next opponent. And not that doesn't mean to change our identity uh, and to do completely different things, but yeah, to recognize and to help us to know better about ourselves and to invest some more time in certain patterns, in certain exploration of spaces more than others to take advantage of uh, those strengths and uh, less developed aspects of the game of our next opponent.
I have this one question. We have often listened to players saying that the training session have been quite good in terms of footballing aspect and all that, but it was not much fun. And over the time, the players actually did get demotivated with time because the training sessions weren't much fun. Sometimes one may say training sessions are not meant to be fun, but rather it's more about how you develop as a footballer. But again, sometimes you have to give them fun time and everything also keeping in mind. So how did you manage to keep the players engaged in the whole training session, both keeping whenever the that is the active period when you have the ball on your feet, and sometimes when the ball isn't in your feet? How do you manage the training session as well so that the players aren't getting bored with the time?
I've always seen the match day, Sunday, as the highest level of chaos in terms of the physical load, in terms of the mental load, in terms of the actions that the players need to perform, the volume of actions, the frequency of actions, in terms of the problems that the players need to solve in a specific amount of time. So it for me that always represents the highest level of chaos, not just for the players but also from the coaching staff, uh, organizational aspect of it, of the everything. And that's the beauty of the game, that you have all of this in a span of 90 minutes. And so with that having said, the training should be an opportunity to find some order in this chaos. And I think there was this quote by Mikel Arteta where he said that, you know, as a player you feel much more comfortable when you know what you're going to expect on the match day. Um, if your match day experience undershoots your expectations, then you're in a situation of anxiety. You don't know what to do. If your match day's experience overshoots your training load, then you automatically, it means that your players are stressed on the match day. They're fatigued on the match day. They're not able to perform because just the training was extremely hard. And then of course it's a question of of context. So I think as a player, when a player feels most comfortable when your match day expectations are as close as possible to what you have experienced already in training in terms of the training load. And of course it's difficult to talk about one specific day because you have the entire day of the week which you have sessions, and then you also have the entire season in mind, the whole macro cycle which you have been preparing for, including the preseason, including the load. So it's difficult to say for one specific aspect of it. But of course, the basics, like your philosophy, the clear idea of how you want to play, um, that should be kept in mind in terms of um, what the players experience during training. So let's say you have a philosophy, and all the players on your team are on board with that philosophy of what we are expected to do. What is the baseline philosophy of what we do in this dressing room under this project, under the season, and what do we expect to do when we have the ball? What do we expect to do without the ball? What is our culture in general? And then within that, it's easier to enforce the players to have fun when someone is going outside this philosophy, or have punishments when people are going outside this philosophy, when the fulfillments are not met. In that context, it's easier to have fun. So then that ends up being much more relevant to the players, because they know what exactly we're doing. It's not just we're having fun out of context, because they know that, yeah, this is all that we're doing, everything that we're doing is in context of what we're going to experience on match day. And when it comes to the match day, they feel much more prepared of what they're expected to do. And then of course it comes when it comes to designing the training session, the intensity that you have, the relevance of what you're going to experience on the match day. Because if you have a game on Sunday and you were expected to, oh, just taking as an example, your team, on Sunday you're facing a difficult opponent, and you're expected to have major phases without the ball, which means that you will be expected to sit organized, defending in your half. And then on training day, your training session is composed of a lot of possession, and then you're punishing your players when they are not able to keep possession, and I don't know, you're doing a lot of work without the ball, and then come the match day, and the players are facing completely different, and you're expecting them to find solutions out of that. So I think these are the things that brings up inconsistencies in the way the players go through every week. So that is something that I keep in mind when training the session, how relevant it is to the context of what they're going to expect on the match day. And then of course how they hit the targets, how they find their solutions. Because when it comes to the different loads, the physical load, the cognitive load, they need to be able to find solutions that they may, because it's impossible to prepare a player for every single problem that they're going to face on match day, because match day, as I said, is a representation of ultimate chaos. So, but still, for them, the ability to be able to find solutions within the context of our game model, within the context of what they're facing, and within a group dynamic of other players who they have around them. So I think when they're able to find these solutions, that's what brings the players reward, that makes them feel that we have a working group that is actually functioning, that we are working towards a common goal, regardless of whether the on Sunday the ball has come to me and I've lost the ball, but still I'm working under a certain culture. We are, as a team, we are moving in the right direction, and that's the feeling that every player needs to have, even if the player's on the bench. That's the feeling that the players that we are moving forward, that this project is actually working, and that's the feeling that everybody needs to have. And then when that feeling is there, and regardless of the result, regardless of whether the player's on the field or on the bench, everyone intends to have more fun in the training session.
We have often seen managers losing the dressing room. We have often seen managers being called that this manager has lost the dressing room. So, what are the key components of team building and cultural implementation? Because in modern football, it's the most basic duty of a coach to have a team culture and a team building effect that takes place, which helps the team moving forward, because a team without a solid team building culture may even not work out. The team may not even play that good in the pitch, because the mentality aspect is hampered without a proper team building culture. So I will go to this question to Mr. Hayes. What are the key components of team building and cultural implementation for you?
Well, there is a famous sentence that used to express the idea that they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And the first and the most important, I would say, aspect of team building is to generate a platform where everyone um, can feel important in that collective, and that requires from the coach a big attribute to know and to understand well how to touch each individual, how to make this individual feel not only uh, participant of the collective, but to feel uh, the sense of agency of that inside that collective, to feel that he is contributing in somehow or in some way um, uh, to the performance and to the capacity of the collective, and that is a very demanding exercise from the point of view of the coach culture, ultimately in terms of being collective, in terms of putting each one in a role of contribution for the best of the other, and that in the as we know, in the actual state of the society, is each time more difficult, as we are living with a tendency for the separation, for the individuality, to be each one in his own space, with the social medias, with the technologies. If we don't generate that connection and that relationship and that positive environment where they feel comfortable and they feel that they are contributing for the evolution of what the team is constructing and is developing, any of your ideas uh, will will get life without that connection uh, and that spirit and mindset. So that is something that we need to cultivate daily, to cultivate with each of our interventions uh, by reinforcing or emphasizing the ones that they autonomously express, so they feel rewarded by it, and they will get this tendency to do more and more things like that that contribute for the collective, um, but also by ourselves we need to recognize in group some of these attitudes, understand our role here as a coach a bit as someone that is collecting from what autonomously emerges, is collecting the things that benefits the whole and is encouraging them, and the ones that are not so aligned with this collective culture, we need to modulate them. We need to educate on the way they behave, on their attitudes, to be gradually more and more aligned. And but that is a dynamic process where is not completely always evolving in a favorable way. And so you need to uh, be constantly managing and promoting these um, these aligned attitudes that contribute positively for the dynamic.
A very insightful and an interesting answer, how the team works and how you have to give the team an autonomy, but on the other hand you need to have your own say at the all it, and in center of it all you have to also take care of the players well-being, and also you have to implement to have a better work culture at place also. Now coming to Mr. Rao, I will ask the same question, but I will just add a point. We have seen even the big coaches, someone like a Rafa Benitez, sometimes losing a dressing room, which creates a lot of havoc. And we have always seen that a team who have a very good team culture at place, all the new signings actually gets accustomed well and starts to play well better within a very short span of time because he has a very good team culture to begin with. He gets accustomed to the team quickly and it plays a very big role. So how do you think, apart from the basic question that how do you believe and how do you want to implement team culture in your side, so how important is it to have a good team building culture in the side as well for the new signing as well as its effect on the performance of the team as well?
I think I think this famous quote about management, not just in the game, but in general. Management is about knowing everybody's trigger points. You know what what makes them, uh, what ruffles their feathers, and I think it's knowing, what's their limits, and knowing when to push those buttons, when to push those limits. So I think it's very relevant when it comes to management as well, and knowing your players and knowing what each one needs. Some players are motivated positively, some players are motivated negatively. When you ruffle their feathers a little bit, that's when they bring out their best, in uh, the form of their personality. So I think it's first and foremost knowing that, and then when it comes to setting your culture in the dressing room, it's about establishing the the mentality, and most importantly, establishing the non-negotiables. Because at the end of the day, you are coming up with a model, a style of play. You're coming up with a philosophy, and your job is to convince your players that with this philosophy, this is the way we can succeed as a group. And regardless of what happens on one single weekend or the following weekend, every player is there, sacrificing physically and mentally, suffering physically and mentally every weekend and throughout the week for you. And every player at the end of the day wants to know why. Is it what is the reason? So you need to be able to give the player the reason why it needs to be, why this is required. So when you establish non-negotiables, you first of all, talent sets the floor, attitude sets the ceiling. You establish that it's your talent that has brought you to the dressing room, but it's your attitude that will determine how long you will stay. And that's a non-negotiable attitude. Second non-negotiable, we do not slack. And if we slack, what are the consequences? That needs to be established, and that needs to be self-governed, not just with the coach. That, okay, someone has broken a rule, it's the coach who comes like a teacher. It's within the group, because you want to develop a team of leaders, because it's not you who's going and playing on Sunday on the pitch, it's the players. So within themselves, are they able to self-govern and correct themselves if things go wrong? And that's part of enforcing the culture. And of course, if you take specific managers and talk about specific consequences, in specific circumstances in which they have succeeded or failed, it's difficult to point out why. Because you can always look into retrospect and say that in a period of time, whichever manager, maybe Rafa Benitez, whether he was successful at one club and not successful at the other club when it comes to the culture. So there are a lot of things that needs to be taken into consideration. But at the end of the day, it's about the team culture, because you lose the dressing room when the players don't understand what they are suffering for. And everyone knows in management, it's difficult to keep everybody happy. I mean, Pep Guardiola talks about it every single weekend. He gives press conferences every single weekend about it. So even if a player is on the bench, are they having the right reasons to believe that we are moving forward as a team, and me being on the bench is the best solution at this moment for this team? And the player needs to believe in that. Player who's working in the training session needs to believe that what we're working on, what we're working towards, is for that common goal. And on the on the pitch, on the weekend, in the game, when we lose the ball, we all are working to win it back. And every player needs to believe that this is part of what the culture is. This is what we are doing, and we're all doing this because this is, we all suffer at the moment, but then in the long term, there are gains. So every player needs to believe in that. So as the role of the manager is enforcing this philosophy. And um, in competitive football, unfortunately, manager needs to do it in a very short period of time to make the players believe, to make everyone believe that this suffering is necessary in order to move forward, and that is part of enforcing the team culture within the dressing room.
That's a totally different but an interesting take on how you create an set of rules, a set of guidelines that the team, a player has to self-evaluate to see whether where his position in the team is right now and how it can change with his approach in how he trains in the sessions, how he actively participates in the sessions. So it's a very interesting take. And one question that I was waiting, or a talking point I was waiting to ask for the total duration of our podcast, I will start it and I will go to Mr. Ace on this first one. That is, what is success for you as a coach and how you measure it?
Um, well, thank you for the question, as it is opportunity for me to express my particular point of view related with that. As I was saying with the previous explanation, I see this constant need of everyone inside the team that I'm responsible for to be feeling recognized and to be feeling comfortable um, within the process, and knowing that the process is made of challenges, of demands. Um, to me, success will be associated with this. How much recognition from my players uh, I can generate in terms of feeling the benefits of what they do, in terms of feeling their own evolution with what they do. Um, and when you talk about uh, feeling that what you are doing has a meaning uh, and has positive consequences. Yeah, those will be my main indicators, and I believe those indicators will then get me more close to have the quantitative results that we are all looking for.
So now again I will go to the same question, Mr. Rao, and I will just add this one point, that is, I will ask again the same question, that is, what is success for you and as coach and how do you measure it? But again also, does this success which you want to achieve, does it change over time? Does it changes over every period of time, like 3 or 4 matches there is one thing that you perceive as success, but it changes after a few matches and after a few months it again changes? Is success replaceable or changeable over time, or is it a single focal point, that is, this is the success that I want to achieve? So I will leave the dice to you to speak. What do you feel about it?
Yeah, it's a very difficult question because it's a very because the answers are very relative depending on how you set your bar. I think for me, coaching is quite a demanding job, quite a challenging job, and it's one of the jobs where uh, we see it so many times over all the years that we experience managers going through different phases. We always see, and as a coach, it's, I think it's very relevant to say that you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself be the villain. And you can take the example of Klopp. He's had so much massive success, and suddenly in one season he gets judged so harshly, so critically because of the results. So from the perspective of a coach, and I think most coaches would agree to this. A prime example is Guardiola, the way he If you listen to his press conferences, it's quite evident in the way he articulates himself that he sees success in every week, focusing just on the next game, or whether it's a cup game, the league game, or the tournament game. He just focuses on the next game, and success is measured only by how you perform in the next game. If you hit your expectations the next game, you're successful. If you don't, you're not successful. So I think every coach is in that moment and he expects all his players to be in the same frame of mind to be able to measure quantitative success from every game to game. On the other hand, reflectively, yeah, we can see a coach's career, and or we can see a coach's season, or we can see a coach's tenure as part of a club, and you can always say, okay, I measure success in terms of longevity. That the way Alex Ferguson was able to be so successful at Manchester United and had so many aspects to it. The way he was able to rotate his squad, the way he was able to adapt to changes tactically, the way he was able to adapt to the league demands over a period of time, or Arsene Wenger. And then you can measure success in terms of longevity in comparison to other close coaches who have had successful but very brief stints. For me personally, the way I see coaching, what fulfills me as a coach is how I've impacted in some way or the other a player's life, and I would like to quote something that Mourinho said, which actually for me was it made a very big impact on me, and it's coaching is taking a player where they can't take themselves. And for me that's a measure of success when a player is able to tell you that, when I had you as a coach, I was able to expand my dimensions of player. I was able to do things that I was not able to do before, or I was able to achieve things that I have not done before. For me, that on a personal level, that is success for a coach. Even if you're able to make an impact in one single individual's life, I think that defines success for a coach. But then again, football is watched by millions of people, and everybody judges success differently. So it's a very relative, with some. I think every coach would have had, who has been successful at the game, would have impacted at least one human being's life in some way or the other. So there would have been at least one player who would have told that, that because of this coach, I owe a lot. So for on an individual level, that is success for the coach. But then when you look at the millions of people who watch the game, the millions of fans, how they judge if the coach has been successful or not, I think it's left to everyone's own opinion.
So, captains, that was all for today. We need to end our session here. Thanks, Mr. Rao and Mr. Reis, for being with us today. And to all of our viewers, thanks a lot for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe to our channel for more such podcasts such as this one. Until next time, it's goodbye from Armband. We will meet again with our new podcast.